So the other day, I was talking to a first year teacher who was questioning whether or not they were cut out for teaching. And I personally have a special place in my heart for newer first year teachers, especially this time of year, because when I first questioned what this was the time of year when I first questioned whether or not I was going to make it as a teacher during my first year. And so today we're going to dive into what I told her when she asked me whether or not she was cut out for teaching. So let's dive in.
Hey, teacher bestie. My name's Helena, and I'm the creator of the Present Teacher Podcast. I'm a first year teacher coach, and in this podcast, you are going to learn everything from simple, actionable classroom management, social emotional learning, and teacher wellness strategies. You know that impact you want to make in the classroom? Well, we're going to make it happen here.
So the first thing I said to her, and I want to say to you, if you can relate to this, is it's completely normal to question whether or not you're cut out to be a teacher. All teachers at some point or another have felt that way, or at least most of them have. I know I personally have. And honestly, if you were to sit down and have a coffee chat or a one-on-one conversation with the teachers you're looking up to online or that teacher next door, you're going to realize that a majority of them have gone through this as well. And so, if they can go through this and get to the other side and turn into the amazing teacher that you're looking up to, the reality is you can do it too. So, you're not alone if you're questioning whether or not you're cut out to teach. And every teacher questions themselves at some point, especially around this time of year. And so now that we talked about how normal it is to feel like this, let's dive a little deeper into my personal story with when I felt like this. So it was the start of October, behaviors were on the rise, and I constantly had to stop mid-lesson to address behaviors. My students were performing badly on assessments because I had to stop so frequently to address disruptive behavior, and I felt like I was failing as a teacher. I felt like I couldn't get my class under control, and I felt like they were better off with another teacher. I was the first car there because I would often plan, print, and prep the day of, and I was often the last car to leave because I had so much work I had to get caught up on. And this is around the time that I asked myself, am I cut out for this? Do my students deserve better? And I just felt like even though I was doing my best and I gave it absolutely my all, it just wasn't enough. And I couldn't figure out what the secret was. What was the difference between myself and those teachers who were making it seem easy? And so now that we talked about where I was at that point in my career, let's talk about what helped me. What are the steps I took to go from questioning whether or not I could make it as a teacher to now coaching thousands of teachers on how to be the teacher that they dream of being? So the first one is systems. So one at a time, I worked on a system until it got better for me. So I started with classroom management. I figured out what worked for me, and then I continued doing that until my students ran the classroom without me. I could step to the side and have a conversation with an adult, and I didn't have to worry about something happening. I could pull my students to the back of the class for small groups while my students ran centers without me. After that, I focused on communication. I was mortified to talk to families because I thought they wouldn't like me, but then eventually I created systems in place that had it to where I was sending weekly newsletters, I was keeping my families updated, and it became easy to build strong relationships with my families to the point with that they were raving about my class to admin and requesting my class for the younger siblings coming up. After that, another system I focused on was organization. I spent hours finding resources and that I had already purchased or to compile them, and now I came up with a system that I could grab them quickly and save time during plan. My email didn't have 1,000 emails that were unread in it. Instead, it always remained at 0 or 1 or 2. My digital files were organized to the point, like I said, where I could find something quickly and efficiently to save me time on planning and prepping. After I focused on organization, I focused on grading. That was another system I focused on. I was mortified because one day my principal came in and saw my big pile of work I had to grade and asked when I was going to get caught up with that. I was completely mortified because I didn't know how to cut back on the grading, so I wasn't spending so much time. And oftentimes I would stay up the night before report cards were due in order to catch up on grading until I discovered a way to grade papers from that week and return it to students that same week. So the papers we're doing Monday through Thursday, I grade them for that week and I return it to my students, and they're already inputted into the grade book and ready to go by Friday. After the grading, I focused on planning and prepping. Like I said, I was the first car there and the last one to come in. I would often come in and mad dash to the printer, hoping nobody was there so I could print out my activities for the day of. And it felt exhausting because it felt like every day was the same on repeat. I was constantly planning and prepping the day of until I found a way to start planning and prepping a week or two in advance. And it was so much easier to go back and tweak a couple things based off of whether or not my students had grasped the previous lesson, if I had to reteach a skill or something like that, as opposed to starting from scratch every single morning and getting that day ready to go in a frantic state. And then eventually teaching became easy and fun. I was good at it. I was that teacher that I had looked up to, that teacher next door who was leaving at contract time, who wasn't bringing papers home, who wasn't working on the weekends. And I'm not gonna lie, at first I felt guilty. I felt like, who am I to let teaching be easy? All these teachers I see online are talking about how hard teaching is for them, and I feel guilty that I found a way for it to be easy for me. But then eventually, and again, I that was possible because these systems I came up with and I figured out along the way. I then started using that for good and I started sharing what was working for me online. So, learning those systems to get all those components working together really allowed teaching to be easy and fun. I, beforehand, honestly, my relationships were very strained. I didn't have any energy to pour into my relationship with my then boyfriend, now husband. I was constantly working on the weekends. I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my family or friends. During breaks, I would spend several days just sleeping because I was completely zonked, emotionally and mentally drained from the school year. And I felt like I just couldn't move. At the end of the day, I would often sit on the couch and just disassociate because I just had nothing left to give. And so having all that go from there to making it be easy honestly changed my life. So now that we talked about those systems and how they changed my life, let me give you some last pieces of encouragement, which is you are here for a reason. You are a teacher for a reason. There's a reason you wanted to be a teacher. You wouldn't have the desire to make an impact and be a teacher if you weren't meant to do so. So you are meant to be here. And your students were sent to you for a reason. I know when you're in the thick of it, you can question whether or not you have what it takes and if your students deserve better, but the answer is no. Those students were sent to you for a reason and they deserve you. They deserve you exactly where you are in your journey. And you're doing better than you think. I know it's easy to be your biggest critic right now and to be hard on yourself, but you're actually making a greater impact than you realize. And one day, future teacher you is going to look back and thank you that this version of you who was in the figuring it out stage. You're gonna look back one day and think, oh, remember when, like I often do, I look back to that first year teacher me who had a choice to quit or to keep going, and I decided to figure it out. And I am so grateful that version of me decided to figure it out because I wouldn't be where I am today. And the same's going to happen to you. There's a future version of you in, a year or two who's going to look back and be like, man, remember when I struggled with this? And now look at where I am. I'm so grateful I didn't give up. I'm so grateful I figured out what works best for me. So, and when I look back on those days when I was figuring out, I realized that it all added up to where I am now. There wasn't one strategy, one anything. It was just a bunch of right choices and deciding to get better every day and try something out every day until I eventually compiled this huge system, this huge routine, this huge, you know, strategies even that just make it easier and more fun. And it all added up to now. Even the ones that didn't work out led me to the ones that did. So I don't regret any of it. So just know it's going to all add up. So that wraps up everything I have to say in regards to not feeling good enough as a teacher. So let's recap what we talked about so far. The first thing is that it's completely normal to not feel like you're doing good enough as a teacher. We've all been there. Many teachers have. The second thing, I shared a little more about my personal story. The third thing, I talked about what helped me and the systems I incorporated to get me from figuring it out phase to where I am now. And then the fourth thing we talked about was a little bit of encouragement, some last minute thoughts I have in regards to questioning whether or not you're good enough. So that wraps up everything. If you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you're tuning in from. That way this week's content can reach more teachers who need it. If you want to keep this conversation going and you want to see those systems I mentioned, I definitely recommend checking out. If you want to see those systems I mentioned earlier and how those work for me, I definitely recommend checking out the Present Teacher Circle. The Present Teacher Circle is my program that helps new and first year teachers figure out what works best for them and to create those systems. Everything from classroom management, like I talked about, to planning and prepping, to grading, communication, we cover it all. So definitely go check that out. We would love to have you. If you want to take it a step further, I actually have a book coming out for new and first year teachers that talks more about my story. What I like about this book that I've written is it starts off with a story of where I started out with and then where I ended up, and then it gives you the strategies behind it. So, for example, the second chapter in the book is all about classroom management. So, the first part of the book or that chapter, I talk about what it looked like in my classroom, what a typical day went when I struggled with classroom management, and then I dive into a story about what it looked like a couple years later when I figured out what worked best for me. And then at the end of the chapter, I give you the strategies on how I transformed that so you can take what works for you as inspiration and leave out the rest. And then I even give you some questions to kind of help you think of what are some systems I can incorporate that can help me get there. So that wraps up everything. Remember, you are doing an amazing job. You're gonna get there. It's only a matter of time. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, remember we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, teacher bestie. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope that you were able to take away some value that will help you thrive inside and out of the classroom. It would mean the world to me if you could take 5 seconds right now and leave a review on this podcast. And if you found this podcast especially helpful, make sure to take a screenshot of this episode right now and tag me on your socials to let me know you're listening. As always, remember that we are stronger together with all the love in the world. Helena, aka the Present Teacher. See you next time, teacher bestie.